On August 21st, 2023, speedrunning history was made. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was beaten in 14 minutes and 46.48 seconds, a new world record, by summoning Salt.
World fucking record!
Speedrunning world records can only truly be appreciated by understanding the amounts of skill, luck, and dedication that go into them, and Punch-Out is no exception. This is the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out speedrun world record explained. This video is sponsored by Raycon. By now, Raycon's everyday earbuds have made a name for themselves by providing the same audio quality as the big expensive brands but at half the price. I'm sure you've heard of them, maybe you've even been considering them for a while. But the best time to get a pair is right now because they just launched an upgraded model of the everyday earbuds. The upgraded everyday earbuds have all the features of the original best-selling model plus several new ones. The biggest for me is the new ergonomic shape with optimized gel tips that even fit my stupidly shaped ears. I've always struggled with earbuds before until I tried the Raycons. I can even take them out on my morning runs because they're weatherproof and sweat resistant. They sit tight and comfy in my ears at the start of my run, and they're still just as tight at the end of it. Seriously, if you've been looking for new earbuds, there is no better time to try Raycons. They've got a 30-day happiness guarantee and this special deal. If you click the link in the video description or go to buyraycon.com/bismuth, you can get 15% off your Raycon purchase plus free shipping. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is straightforward. You, Little Mac, have to win 14 increasingly hard 3-round boxing matches, the last one against Mike Tyson himself. Fighters have a health bar and get knocked down when it reaches 0, at which point definitely not Mario the referee saps the collar away from Little Mac's clothes and he counts up until they get back up. If they do, their health bar is partially refilled, Little Mac's shorts regain their color and the fight continues. If they don't, they're knocked out. And if they get down 3 times in a single round, you win by technical knockout or TKO. For the player, it's a similar situation. Little Mac can get back up after being knocked down, but only a certain number of times per fight. If he keeps getting knocked down, he eventually doesn't get back up and loses. Little Mac can throw 5 different punches. A and B throw right and left gut punches, and combining them with pressing up turns them into jabs instead. Finally, pressing start throws a special uppercut or star punch at the cost of 1 star. Stars are earned by landing a specific number of blows and sometimes at random under specific conditions. You can also dodge, block, or duck by pressing the other directions on the D-pad. Little Mac also has stamina, which goes down every time one of his punches misses or gets blocked, and when he blocks or takes a hit. If it reaches 0, he gets exhausted and you need to dodge punches until he recharges. This is generally a non-issue during the speedrun, as Salt will be pummeling his opponents most of the time. Although some fighters appear twice, every one of the 14 matches is different. Your opponents have different stats in a defined pattern, often sprinkled with a dash of randomness. When they get back up after being knocked down, most of them can have a smaller health refill or a bigger one. All of these elements shape the fastest strategy. As a side note, most fights will be broken up into up to 3 phases for each knockdown leading to a KO or TKO. They're not to be confused with rounds. In fact, spoiler alert, Salt knocks out every opponent in round 1. For every fight in the run, we're first going to look at what Salt is trying to do and what are his chances of getting a favorable outcome. Then, after playing back the fight, we'll see how he fared. Thanks to a simulation-based probability calculator by ZoxSox, we'll be able to estimate how lucky the run has been up to this point. It simulates 100 million runs and counts how many could get this time or faster with similar execution to give an idea of how many attempts you would typically need to get one run this good. Instead of tracking their times using a timer and splits, Punch-Out runners punch in the in-game time of each fight on a spreadsheet. This allows them to track the entirety of their past attempts to derive statistical data and other analyses. Measuring speedruns using in-game time rather than real time is a less common practice, but it's almost always done this way for good reason. In Punch-Out, it was born out of tradition because the primary form of competition used to be the in-game time from individual fights, but it stayed mainly because Punch-Out is driven by randomness in ways beyond the actual gameplay. Most of the time, fighters get back up at a random point in the count, and they sometimes attempt to get up, which pauses the count. On top of the already gruesome gauntlet the game throws at you, dealing with these random time losses is something the Punch-Out community unanimously rejected, and so the primary forms of competition are individual levels and single segment with in-game time. The clock does have its quirks though, as we're gonna see later. For now, let's meet our first fighter, Glass Joe. Glass Joe is, well, the first opponent. He doesn't do anything until 40 seconds in, where he backs up and charges you. This can be countered by a well-timed gut punch to instantly KO him and win the fight.
Give it like a couple more to soda maybe, and then just probably gonna be done. Oh yeah, I got stumped immediately. Even the Giants, I have no idea where to go. Wow.
Exactly 38 seconds in, Salt throws 2 left jabs and 2 left gut punches before landing the final blow. This is a technique known as buffering. In Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and in video games in general, buffering in action means that you can press a button before the action is available, usually because you're in the middle of some other action. By keeping the button pressed, the action will be performed at the earliest possible moment. This makes the controls feel so much easier and more intuitive because you don't need to time your button presses precisely when you finish your previous punch or dodge. But more importantly, it allows speedrunners to track time precisely. All the different actions take a fixed amount of time to carry out. Notice how left and right punches have slightly different lengths. You can measure any arbitrary amount of time with the right combination of buffered actions since you know they will always come out on the first possible frame. This is what Zallard1 came up with. At precisely 38 seconds, buffer 2 left face punches, then 2 left gut punches. Glassjoe backs up between the first 2 punches to prepare his attack. In fact, he always waits until the end of the punch to start backing up, which gives a bit of leeway to the strategy. Here there's some variation. He can shake his fist twice or 4 times. Salt simply has to react in time. He shook twice, so a right gut punch lands perfectly. If he had shaken 4 times, 2 left gut punches would have done the trick instead. Buffer strategies are the bread and butter of Punch-Out speedrunning. They're used all the time to make fights as consistent as they can be, and Salt memorized dozens of them to the point where they're second nature. Next up is Kaiser. Again, a fairly simple fighter with no special attributes or behavior, Kaiser has one characteristic to keep in mind: the probability of a lucky star. He gives a guaranteed star on the 8th punch that lands, as well as every second punch after that, but he has an additional 50% chance of giving a lucky star if you already have one. Star punches deal a ton of damage to him, so Salt's strategy is to land 8 hits quickly, then stun him and knock him down with the star he got. Then punch him twice to get a second guaranteed star, hoping for the 50-50 coin flip to give him a third one. A second star punch gives him the second knockdown, and a third gives him the TKO at 36 seconds. If he doesn't get the coin flip, he simply needs to get a guaranteed star, which yields a 37 instead.
Hey, what should we call our fantasy league? I'm trying to make some joke name that combines Punch-Out and football. All I had was Soda Popinski, but that's really not that good.
As you can see, Salt did get a lucky star and got a 36-second fight. The start of the fight is entirely buffered, but some of these punches are more complex than they look. Kaiser can have his guard up or down. If it's up, he blocks jabs, and if it's down, he blocks gut punches. However, here his guard is down, and as Little Mac is punching, he raises it and gets hit. This is known as a misdirected gut punch. Fighters don't just raise and lower their guard at random, they react to you. Pressing up indicates that you're about to throw face punches, so it makes them raise their guard. Different fighters react at different speeds and generally speed up as the game advances. Salt presses A to throw a gut punch, but Kaiser's guard is down, so he instantly taps up. This doesn't change the punch he's already throwing, but it tricks Kaiser into raising his guard while the punch is going off, so he doesn't block it. Misdirected gut punches essentially let you sneak in punches that would otherwise be blocked. Note that it's not always visually clear when a gut punch is normal or misdirected. The 4th punch is also misdirected, but it doesn't look that way because Kaiser's guard is already up at the start of the punch. Throwing a regular gut punch would cause him to lower his guard and block the next punches. You may have noticed that Salt's final time here is 36.25 and his previous record had a 36 flat. Where does the time loss come from? Well, to understand that, we need to look deeper into the in-game clock. The in-game clock is consistent. It serves as a very good measure of how fast a fight was completed. However, it bends time in a way us mere mortals cannot comprehend. First, in-game seconds are way faster than real seconds. In fact, they're much closer to Super Mario Bros. Seconds if anything. Each fight has a base clock speed, 1273 for most of them with a few faster and slower outliers. Every frame, a counter goes up by that number, and for every multiple of 25,600, the clock goes up by 1 second, so the higher the speed, the faster the clock. Each in-game second is further divided into multiples of 4096 that correspond to a set of decimals. 4096 doesn't divide the second equally, so the last increment, 0.99, is only a quarter of the length of the others. Effectively, this means that in most cases, the decimals update only once every 3 or 4 frames. For some reason, the distribution of decimals is also slightly uneven, with a bias towards higher decimals. In other words, losing a handful of frames can cost as much as half a second and as little as 0.03 seconds. On top of that, the clock stops for a short time when you land punches, longer for a star punch. It also stops while a fighter is down, and sometimes during a special attack like Super Macho Man's Super Spin Punch. There's actually a glitch where the clock can freeze for an arbitrarily long time while the fight keeps going, and it's obviously banned by default from all speedruns of this game. Luckily, it's usually trivial to avoid triggering accidentally. Despite all of its quirks, I want to reiterate that the in-game clock is fair and reliable. On one hand, the concept of minutes and seconds is completely detached from reality to the point of nonsense. Salt's in-game time of 14 minutes and 46 seconds can't be translated back to real time in any meaningful way. But what matters is that this is a frame of reference that is consistent with itself, and 2 runs can be accurately and reliably compared within that frame of reference. With all that in mind, we can see that the difference between 36 flat and 36.25 is a single decimal increment. It can come from the timing of this dodge in phase 1, the first punch in phase 2, or the dodge in phase 3. Losing just a couple of frames here or there leads to a quarter of a second time loss. Next we have Piston Honda. Now the effective randomness of the run is starting to be felt, but this time it's not because of random lucky stars, because stars are guaranteed on every punch on this fight. Quick note, not every type of punch qualifies to give out a star. Counter punches, punches while the opponent is stunned, and star punches themselves cannot get a star. This leaves punches that avoid the opponent's guard or surprise them as they're winding up for an attack. Also, you can only ever have 3 stars at once. If you earn a star but you already have 3, the next one is simply lost. Instead of lucky stars, the other 2 main sources of randomness are at play in this fight, Piston Honda's pattern and the refill amount when he gets back up. Towards the end of the first phase, Honda does a set of delays of varying lengths and has a chance of throwing a wrench in the run with an untimely hook, uppercut, or block. The probability of this happening is thankfully mitigated with a manipulation that we'll dive deeper into in a bit, so it sits at roughly 1 in 8. If you avoid that, you then get a 3 in 8 chance for a low refill in phase 3 and a 5 in 8 chance for a high refill. Obviously, low is good since you can get the TKO quicker when you have less HP to work through. The low refill gets you a 43 second fight and a high refill will get you a 44 or 45. The exact decimals can vary a bit.
One's victims. There we go.
As you can see, Salt got pretty lucky in this fight. He got the best possible outcome for a 43 second fight. Now you can see the star punches he throws deal a whole lot of damage. Those are max damage uppercuts. There are several ways to do this with variable names, the regular, the reverse, and the inverse max damage uppercut. The basis is the same for all of them. When you hit an opponent with an uppercut while they are in the process of moving their guard up, the punch will deal the maximum damage. To achieve this, Salt throws a star punch and while the punch is going off, presses up. Honda reacts by raising his guard, so he's in the process of raising it when the uppercut connects, dealing max damage. The exact timing of the up press varies by fighter because each of them reacts at a different speed. The three kinds of max damage uppercuts are simply defined by the position of the fighter's guard when you're throwing the punch. A regular max damage uppercut is straightforward. The fighter's guard is down, and tapping up as the punch is going off causes them to start raising it. What Salt did here is the reverse. Honda's guard starts by being up, but Salt is not holding up, so it comes down. Immediately after throwing the star punch, he taps up, causing Honda's guard to be in the process of going back up in time for the punch to connect. Finally, the inverse max damage uppercut is similar, but you hold up instead of doing a quick tap, which causes the guard to stay up after the star punch. To finish off the fight, Salt dodges twice. The first one is buffered, but the second is a quick dodge that comes with a very slight delay. That means he can't buffer it. He has to time it so it goes off only a couple of frames later. A quick dodge is simple but tricky. As Idelmak is dodging, pressing the opposite direction of the one you dodged to causes him to return into position faster than normal. Pressing up also works here. This has a fairly precise window. Too early and it doesn't work. Too late and it works, well, too late. If done right like Salt did here, Little Mac barely avoids Honda's jab and can get a perfectly timed knockout punch. This is Don Flamenco. While you do get a star for every punch that you can sneak past his guard, unfortunately the timing window to hit that punch is a single frame. You need to hit a frame-perfect punch, but if you do, you can complete the fight in 14 seconds. Let's see how it went for Salt. Of course, he got it. I say of course because despite the frame-perfect punch, this fight is automatic. Why? Because of buffer strategies. Everything you see him do in Phase 1 is buffered and works every time. By buffering a left gut punch, a left dodge, a left quick dodge, and a face punch, you get the star every time. This was famously discovered by Zallard1 in 2012 as Mike Tyson's Punch-Out's very first buffer strategy, and buffered inputs revolutionized the speedrun ever since.
Dude, Zallard, I don't think you even understand what you've done right now.
In Phase 2, the exact timing of the dodge on Flamenco's uppercut makes a tiny difference in the final time, between 14.97 and 15 flat. Salt got 0.99 here. Time for King Hippo. King Hippo is the destroyer of runs. The only way to damage him is to stun him with a face punch when he opens his mouth to wind up for a jab, and follow up with a series of gut punches. The problem is, he can throw two punches, a short jab with a 5 in 8 chance, and the open mouth long jab with a 3 in 8 chance. Knocking Hippo out requires stunning him 3 times, and the chance of getting 3 opportunities in a row is 1 in 19. Every time he doesn't open his mouth, you lose 2 or 3 seconds. The odds look pretty awful. Or at least they did, until one of the most game-changing strategies was developed by Lukandor and Zoxox, the Hippo Manippo. The idea is simple. Hippo opening his mouth is a random event dictated by the game's random number generation function, or RNG. RNG, especially in the NES era, is only as random as it needs to be while using as few resources as possible. Therefore, it can be manipulated to get predictable outcomes. The RNG function can be broken up into 2 factors, controller inputs and frame count. The frame count is as basic as it can be. It counts the frames since power on. The controller inputs portion is a bit more complicated. Like almost all variables, it's an 8-bit value. Each bit is associated with a button on the controller. On every frame, if a button is pressed, 1 is added to the associated bit. If it's not pressed, nothing changes. It's virtually impossible to control precisely how many frames a button is held for, which means it's impossible to know what this number is after you've started playing the game. To make things worse, to create the output number of the RNG function, the game scrambles the bits of each of these 2 numbers before adding them together. As a result, a small difference in the frame counter or in the buttons pressed wildly changed the output of the RNG function. Despite these challenges, it's actually possible to manipulate some random things in this game. When deciding whether to open his mouth, King Hippo only looks at the last 3 bits of the RNG value. Of the 8 possible values, Hippo only opens his mouth on 001, 011, or 110. The last 3 bits are composed of the sum of these bits on the frame counter and these bits on the controller inputs. If we could somehow control all of these values, Hippo could be manipulated to open his mouth. Controlling the frame timer seems impossible, but there's a trick to it. The time between the moment you press start to begin the fight with King Hippo and the moment he opens his mouth for the first time is fixed, which means the frame timer depends entirely on the timing of this start press. Salt is actually running a side timer that he starts when he powers on the console. He times his start press to be exactly 5 minutes after power on. Thankfully, the exact moment a fight can start is itself on an 8-frame cycle or frame rule. Mark that on your bingo cards. Because of this 8-frame cycle, the timer will always be on the same multiple of 2 frames, and Salt gets an 8-frame window or 0.13 seconds to time his start press. Controlling the input seems even more impossible because this middle bit is affected not just by pressing the A button, but every button with a lower value, B, start, down, and right. On power on, you know the bits are all set to 0, but the moment you press one of these buttons, there's no telling if those bits are on 0 or 1 at any given point. Controlling this value would be hard after a single punch, let alone the dozens that Salt has done already. But there's a perfect little catch. By a stroke of luck, provided that these 2 bits are 0 and 1, Hippo will open his mouth regardless of what this middle bit is. Therefore, with a controlled frame counter, the only actions that change the RNG in a meaningful way are blocking, ducking, and dodging to the right. As it turns out, there's a way to control the value of these bits with 100% accuracy. You simply have to never press those buttons at all. In the first 5 minutes of the run, Salt never blocked, ducked, or dodged to the right. These bits are still set to 0, so the last 3 bits of the RNG will always be 001 or 011, both of which cause Hippo to open his mouth. And this is how, despite how seemingly impenetrable the RNG function is, Salt is able to manipulate a random result 5 minutes into the run. And that turns these garbage odds into this.
Printer. I've still never used one of those.
You may have noticed that Hippo opened his mouth the first time, but not the second. Then he opens it twice in a row, which means Salt gets 3 out of 4. The Hippo Manippo is very potent, but it's not quite enough to force a 3 out of 3. For the second punch, Hippo happens to decide if he should do a short or a long delay on the same frame that he decides to open his mouth or not. Unfortunately, when the RNG is reused within a single frame, the number is changed by shifting the bits around, which means the manipulation doesn't work and the result is effectively random. Furthermore, even if Hippo did open his mouth, Salt couldn't have taken advantage of it because he was too busy manipulating the rest of the fight. I mentioned that the start of the fight is on an 8-frame cycle, which makes it relatively easy to control. However, in the middle of the fight like this, Salt is subject to that pesky multiple of 2 frames, giving him a much smaller window to hit. He uses a visual cue to help him do it. The first time Hippo opens his mouth, Salt has to hit him within a 4-frame window. When his mouth is open, Hippo flashes quickly before throwing his jab. Depending on if the first punch lands before the flash, during the flash, or after the flash, this tells Salt which frame he's on within that window. Once he knows that, he uses the moment where he can damage Hippo to correct his exact timing. This is a simple series of 9 buffered left gut punches. For every frame he needs to delay, he throws in a right gut punch because they're 1 frame slower, in this case 2 of them. He repeats a similar process after the second mouth open to line up the third one perfectly as well. Unfortunately, because his capture card records at 30 frames per second, it's impossible to know for sure which exact frame he landed his punches on, but the bottom line is he stayed in the correct 2-frame window to manipulate Hippo into opening his mouth every time. This is Great Tiger. He's one of the only fully consistent fights. Stars are guaranteed on every eligible punch. So long as Salt executes this right, he can always get a low 48. If Great Tiger is knocked down before 1 minute on the clock while you have full health, he always gets up on the count of 1. Any fighter who gets up on 1 can instantly be knocked down again with a star punch. Therefore, his goal is to get him down as quickly as possible while stocking up on stars so he can simply star punch him twice for the TKO.
Probably like the shelf for my power pack was. Yeah, I just don't have a use for it, so I don't really use anything that would need to be 3D printed, I don't think.
Salt gets stars by sneaking in right gut punches within a 6-frame window. The only point where Salt can really gain or lose time is here. You want to hit him as early as possible while his gem is flashing. He uses visual cues and buffer strategies to achieve this and gets almost the best possible time, a 48 flat. It's possible to get 47.99 with frame-perfect punches, but 1/100th of a second is not worth the risk of being early to the punch and getting blocked. At this point, Salt has only seen favorable outcomes so far. In fact, this run is nearly on the very best possible pace it could be on at this point. You only get a run this good about once every 50 attempts. However, it doesn't really matter much. So far, all the random factors have affected the runtime by fractions of a second or a second at most. The difference between a crazy lucky run like this and an average run is only a couple of seconds, so Salt doesn't have anything to be too excited about just yet. Time for Bald Bull. Now the game is starting to get serious. This is one of the most random fights in the game in terms of how much the strategy changes based on RNG, but thankfully the range of possible round times is not that large. The first phase of the fight is almost fully buffered, so the fun will begin on phase 2. The main element of randomness is the lucky stars. You get a guaranteed one every second eligible punch with a 50-50 chance of getting a lucky star in between. At the start of phase 2, there's a crucial string of punches where Salt wants to get 2 more stars. If he gets a lucky star immediately, the next one is guaranteed and he gets them on 2 punches. If he doesn't, he has another chance at the 50-50 to get them on 3 punches. If he's unlucky both times, he needs the 4th punch to guarantee his 2nd star. The reason why this is so crucial is because Bald Bull changes his attacking pattern starting 20 seconds into the fight, and the speed at which he adapts his guard goes up 30 seconds in. Therefore, the exact time at which Salt gathers his 3rd star has a much bigger impact on how the rest of the fight plays out than it would normally. Generally, getting both stars on 2 punches is better. 3 punches has the potential for the fastest possible fight but is worse on average, and 4 punches is similar with less extreme outcomes. Before 20 seconds, Bald Bull only throws rolling jabs, then he switches to a decision tree with a random chance of taking a branch. Again, every decision he takes shapes the rest of the fight. Generally, it's better for him to keep throwing rolling jabs rather than to switch to hooks and uppercuts, but that's only a 25% chance. On top of all that, there's also a roll for short or long delay as well as a roll for a small or large health refill thrown into the mix. There's no telling what Bull 1 will throw at you, but you have to be ready for it.
Print out like a paper. Yeah, I got this thing 2D printed last night. Alright, 58 incoming. I mean, this is an unbeatable pace ever if I get a 58 here. So I'm glad that's not happening. Just forget about it. Don't even give it a chance. Oh, I love this game.
Here, Salt got the 2 stars in 3 punches. This meant he could potentially get the best possible luck, but he was subject to more time loss. Once phase 3 rolled in, however, the jabs didn't. Bull switched to hooks and uppercuts and gave him the unlucky long delay right at the end of the fight. That's the worst possible outcome in phase 3. This slightly unlucky fight brought his run back closer to the average. A run like this is likely to occur once every 4 attempts. Salt is now in the back half of the game, which begins with a rematch against Piston Honda. This time, his guard is a bit faster, which means Salt won't be able to sneak in several punches in a row like before. Instead, he will use a nasty combo of guard manipulating punches. First, he holds up to make Honda raise his guard, then releases it and quickly throws a gut punch while Honda's guard is still up. This is known as a gutter. Then his guard comes down, so Salt throws a misdirected gut punch by pressing up while the punch is going off, tricking Honda into raising his guard again. Look out for this combo throughout the fight. Honda 2 gives a guaranteed star after 4 punches. After that, it's a pattern of 1 50-50, 1 guaranteed star. Salt will mostly be throwing star punches when it would be a 50-50 chance, since star punches can't give stars themselves, and a regular punch on the guaranteed stars. Most of the star punches need to be max damage, so a lot of guard manipulation will be involved. Salt will be looking to knock Honda down the first time at 25 seconds with 1 star in the bank. After that, the fight gets a bit random. There's a 50-50 chance Honda gets a small or a big health refill, which changes how Salt negotiates phase 2. However, on phase 3, Honda always gets up on a 1 count, which means a single star punch sends him to the mat for the TKO.
That was a tricky read for me. Offline Sandy. I'm doing Sandman IL attempts too. It's just, you know, once every half an hour, if that. Fucking game.
Let's talk about these star punches. Honda's guard moves pretty quickly, so Salt has to use clever ways to sneak those punches in. He uses the reverse max damage uppercut, where Honda's guard goes down as he throws the uppercut, but he taps up to get him to try to raise his guard as the punch lands. This punch has a total window of 5 frames for both button presses. If he presses start earlier, he has more time to press up. If he presses start later, his window for pressing up narrows. This one is quite easy. Hitting Honda with a star punch while he's wiggling his eyebrows automatically deals max damage. In phase 2, Salt got the low refill, which is about 1 second faster. Here he used the inverse max damage uppercut, similar to the reverse, but by holding up instead of simply tapping it, Honda's guard is up immediately after the punch. This gives a window for Salt to let Honda's guard drop and sneak in a face punch. For this max damage uppercut, Salt chooses to buffer the inputs with a quick dodge. This isn't the fastest method, but it's a lot more reliable than trying to time it within a narrow window. Finally, the gutter misdirected gut punch combo knocks Honda down and sets up his guard to be up at the start of phase 3. His guard being up means a reverse max damage uppercut gets the instant TKO. This fight is an excellent example of the range of techniques and little tricks Salt is using for the entirety of this run at every moment. Almost every single button press is meticulously thought out. 2 punches that look the same can be fundamentally different, with different execution and purpose. Thanks to the low refills, Salt saved time here, and this run is now 1 in 5. This is Soda Popinski. Up until now, randomness has been, for the most part, relatively mild. Well, that's about to change because Summoning Salt just entered what's commonly called the red zone of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out speedruns. The red zone is comprised of 3 consecutive fights, Soda Popinski, Bald Bull 2, and Don Flamenco 2, that each have a major element of randomness that will end most runs going into them. Soda Popinski is a straightforward fight. He starts by throwing 2 hooks, then switches up his pattern. He crouches to unleash an uppercut, and here's where his weakness lies. If down is held while Soda is crouched, he remains frozen in this position for several seconds, leaving him vulnerable for a punch that yields a star. For some reason, immediately landing a star punch after that automatically knocks him down no matter how much health he has. It's unclear if this whole interaction is a bug or if it's an intended mechanic, since Soda is the only fighter with this kind of condition. So, once the first 2 hooks are done, the rest of the fight consists of crouch freeze, face punch, star punch 3 times in a row for the TKO. On paper, this makes Soda Popinski an easy fight, but we haven't yet talked about the RNG involved. As it turns out, after the initial 2 hooks, Soda only chooses to throw an uppercut 75% of the time. While it looks like odds are in Salt's favor here, the problem is the fight has 3 phases and Soda needs to uppercut 3 times in a row. If a single one of these punches is a hook, the run is instantly over and Salt needs to reset. A 75% chance 3 times in a row comes out to only 42%, which means there's a 58% chance when coming into this fight that you're not coming out. But that's not it. Even when he chooses to uppercut, Soda makes an additional decision, how long he waits to throw the punch. The delay is random and actually made up of two smaller delays that can each either be short or long, which means the total length of the delay is distributed like this. Thankfully, there's one small bit of RNG manipulation that can be done here. If Salt holds right until Soda crouches, one of them will always be short, reducing the total delay to this instead. The only issue with this strategy is that it conflicts with holding down when Soda crouches, so Salt has to react very quickly and roll his thumb from right to down as soon as he sees Soda crouching. Each longer delay adds about 3 seconds to the fight time and has a 50-50 chance, so the distribution of fight times looks like this from 0 to 3 delays. The exact time can vary by about 1 second within each group based on execution. However, don't forget that this is assuming that Soda throws no hooks at all. If we take that into account, the result is far less appealing. The record he's running against had the fastest possible Soda with this strategy, a 47.99, which is a 5.3% chance event combined with perfect execution. At this point, even though he's 5 seconds ahead, Salt is rightfully expecting this run to be over soon.
Dude, imagine if I did get a 58. This run. Yeah, alright. Take what I can get. I will so gladly take that. Better than the last run. I mean, maybe one day Ripjaws that probably need to be more discovered.
Salt got very lucky with this fight. He got all 3 uppercuts and only 1 longer delay. This is good for a 51, or in this case with perfect execution, a 50.97. This 1 in 5 outcome propels the run to 1 in 16 territory, something Salt would only see once every 3 hours of attempts or so. Next in the red zone is Bald Bull 2. This time, Bald Bull can only be knocked down with a star punch. A regular punch will never do it, no matter how low his health is. Thankfully, every punch snuck through his guard will yield a star. On the other hand, he's not that dumb and can easily dodge star punches unless you catch him while he's stunned or while he's rubbing his ear like this. The first phase of this fight has no randomness at all. Salt simply needs to counter his rolling jabs in a 3-frame window to get stars. Then, holding up for the next jabs makes the window to counter them slightly bigger. To get the first knockout, he simply needs to dodge, stun, star, rinse and repeat until Bald Bull is down. And then the fun begins. In phases 2 and 3, the old strategy for earning stars in this fight was very safe. It consisted of a blocked face punch, dodging Bull's retaliation, and countering for the easy star. This would get a consistent fight of about 128. However, it's possible to do much faster using misdirected gut punches. They can get a star immediately instead, but they have the slightly annoying disadvantage of only getting past Bull's guard 25% of the time. If it lands, the misdirected gut punch saves just under 4 seconds over the safer method, but if it's blocked, it loses a little over a second. In total, Salt needs to obtain 3 stars this way. Therefore, while doing this riskier method has an expected average that just about breaks even with the safe strategy, it can save up to 10 seconds and brings a risk of losing far more. On top of that, Salt is running against a 123.97, near the upper end of lucky outcomes. Let's see how it worked for him this time.
It's like, unless there's new strats or RNG manip further developments, I don't really see it going below 3x. But, I mean, who knows? Cool. Not a complete disaster. So it's pretty close to where we were last time. $53.
In Phase 2, Salt gets a star on the second misdirected gut punch, saving him about 3 seconds over playing it safe. He decides to not push his luck for the second star. Phase 3 did not go so well. It starts with Bull rubbing his ear, letting Salt earn a free star. But then, Salt goes for 2 misdirected gut punches and both fail. He cuts his losses by switching to the safe method to close out the fight. In total, he went for 4 misdirected gut punches and one of them got a star, which is exactly what you would expect. He also got a 128, which breaks even with not going for the risky strategy at all. Unfortunately though, that lost him 4 seconds over his previous record, putting him behind. When going for a world record, average is not enough. You need exceptional luck to pull through, and there's no better occasion to do just that than Don Flamenco 2. Don Flamenco is back, and this time he brings with him better stats and reaction speed, and one very, very juicy number, 1 in 16. While Don 2 gives a guaranteed star on the first punch and every 7th punch after that, for some cruel reason, the chance of getting a random lucky star is 1 in 16 or 6.25%. This easily makes him the king of the red zone. The goal is to get as many stars as possible in Phase 1 to try and speed up the rest of the fight, up to a maximum of 3 random stars. You get 9 shots at the random star, which means the most likely outcome is that you will get none at 56% probability. If that happens, the run is most likely irredeemable and that's a reset. If you do get stars, it's better to get them in the first 2 punches because that lets you use a star punch early. Just in case that's not discouraging enough, Don 2 has 3 possible health refill values when he gets up in Phase 2, with odds favoring the larger refills. The overall strategy for the fight is extremely detailed and hinges on all these factors: how many stars you get, if one of them was early enough, and how big the refill was. Similarly, the range of final times you can get is as wide as ever, going as low as 119 with ludicrously low odds, and most of the time in the 140s or worse. So not only do you need to get lucky, you need to be able to adapt to any scenario the game throws at you, and most importantly, when the luck does go your way, especially when the game gives you the Unicorn 119 pattern, you need to execute. Yet again, Salt is running against an unreasonably lucky 128, a time in the top 4% of outcomes. The deck is fully stacked against him. This is the last brutally unfair fight of the run.
Need at least 1 star, preferably 2. Oh my god. Okay. It's just like the 15-12, man. Made a mistake and got rewarded. What do I do here? Okay, I know what to do. Okay, that was stupid. I didn't look at his health. I didn't need to throw that face punch. Alright, I had like 4 seconds worth of mistakes on that fight. That's sad. But also, like, if I didn't do that, pretty unlikely I would have gotten a time this good.
The fight starts with something we have never seen from Salt yet in this run, a mistake. His first punch, supposed to be a guaranteed star, gets blocked by Don Flamenco. He punched barely too early, possibly by as little as a single frame. He can simply punch again for that first star, but this fumble cost him 2 seconds right off the bat. But then, stars come out pouring. He gets a star on the second random punch, which is early enough for him to throw a star punch right away and save some time. Then he gets 2 more random stars followed by the guaranteed 7th punch star. In fact, he gets so many stars so quickly that he can't store them all. Remember that to get a lucky star, you need to be holding at least 1 already, and the maximum you can have at once is 3 stars. By getting all his stars at once like that, 1 of them doesn't count. Therefore, although he technically got 3 lucky stars in 9 occasions, the result is the equivalent of getting only 2 of them, which is still amazing luck. Then comes the refill at the start of Phase 2. Incredibly, Salt gets the 1 in 8 chance lowest refill. This is in the top 2% of outcomes for this fight, somehow even luckier than the run he was up against. In fact, this was almost too good, because this specific scenario, 2 stars, 1 early, lowest refill, is so rare that Salt had only ever seen it a handful of times, so he didn't have the next steps memorized. He had to look up the optimal strategy to close out the fight in real time while playing, and that set him up for a second mistake in phase 3. Salt got to this point with 1 star in bank, so he should have simply thrown a star punch and ended it right there. However, he misread the strategy and instead threw a simple face jab, losing another 2 seconds. And this Don Flamenco 2 fight that had an incredibly lucky outcome for a 126 came out to a 130 instead because of 2 execution mistakes. Regardless, that was still far better than expected, and most importantly, it kept him within striking distance of the world record. For a chance at the record, Salt needs to be out of Don 2 at about 9:30 or lower. His fastest time ever here is 9:16, and this run is here at 9:23. Not unheard of, but very rare, about 1 in 100, and the best part is that he's now out of the red zone and back to slightly more favorable territory. Coming up is Mr. Sandman. He's rather unforgiving for the average player, but luckily he's pretty straightforward in the speedrun setting. Oddly enough, Salt holds select to start the fight at half health. This is an intentional feature, possibly added as an Easter egg. You can press select between rounds to regain a bit of health. Doing it before the fight even starts doesn't really make sense, since you would always start with max health, so it starts you with half health if you do that instead. Now the reason Salt is doing this here is that he actually takes an intentional knockdown in this fight. Mr. Sandman has a special attack pattern called the Dreamland Express that he does at 1:30 on the clock, where he fires off 3 uppercuts in rapid succession. If successfully dodged, it can then be countered and followed by a large amount of gut punches to deal a ton of damage to him. Normally, he would only do a single one of those in the round, but if you get knocked down at 1:59 or later, he will do a second one when you get up. Getting knocked down doesn't waste much time other than the time it takes to take the punches, because the clock pauses when someone's on the ground, be it you or your opponent. So, in short, the strategy consists of getting a first knockdown before 1:30, dodging the Dreamland Express and countering it to get a second knockdown, then taking an intentional knockdown yourself to force a second Dreamland Express and get the TKO afterwards. You have to hope that his refill in phase 3 is a low refill, which thankfully is a 75% chance. You also have to hope that the few delays Sandman does at various points throughout the fight are short, especially the 5-second one in phase 3.
What? What a weird one. A mistake-free 222.
Salt starts the fight by manipulating Sandman's guard and sneaking gut punches while he's throwing rolling jabs, sometimes intentionally taking one. Eventually, Sandman switches to throwing hooks, at which point Salt switches his strategy as well. Instead of waiting for the hook to come out so he can dodge and counter, Salt throws a punch that Sandman easily dodges to force a counterattack that Salt then dodges and counters himself, which is faster. In phase 2 comes a Dreamland Express, and Salt has a buffered series of dodges that lets him start dodging the first punch at the perfect time. For some reason, the way you dodge the second and third punches of the Dreamland Express changes how long you can stun Sandman afterwards. By performing the quick dodges especially quickly, Salt is able to stun Sandman for long enough to throw up to 18 punches which sands Sandman down again. Phase 3 is similar. To get Sandman to throw a second Dreamland Express, Salt waits until 159 to get knocked down, then dodges the Dreamland Express and counters with a series of gut punches. He gets a final time of 222, which is somehow both perfectly average and very rare. In short, the main randomness factor for the final time in this fight is the delay in Phase 3, but all the shorter delays before that each have a small part to play. Salt got perfect luck in Phases 1 and 2 because he got all short delays, leading to a rare 151 second knockdown. This allowed him to deal more damage to Sandman than usual before the intentional knockdown, leading to an overall faster fight, even as fast as 217. Unfortunately, he got the longer delay in Phase 3, which cost him 5 seconds and got him a final time of 222, the luckiest possible of the bad Phase 3 delay outcomes. This set him back a little bit more compared to his record, but he was still in it if the last 2 fights went really well. The final fight before Tyson is Super Macho Man. His signature is the Super Spin Punch, where he spins around a random number of times and you have to dodge every spin consecutively. Thankfully, the in-game clock actually stops during this move, so the number of spins doesn't matter in the final time of the run. In fact, the fact that the clock stops is also useful because the timer starting up again serves as a visual cue for when the attack is over and you can counter him. It's also possible to use an audio cue instead, which is what Salt prefers. Every spin comes out exactly 32 frames apart, except for the final spin, which takes 33 frames instead. This gives time for the previous spin's sound to play for 1 extra frame and rise a tiny bit more than the others. It's subtle, but it can be picked up by a trained ear. Macho's guard is similar to Piston Honda too, so the same kinds of strategies I explained in detail are used here as well. The main difference is that max damage uppercuts are much easier here than they were in that fight. Early in the fight, Macho makes a decision between throwing 2 uppercuts into a mini spin punch and restarting his initial loop. You want him to choose uppercuts for a chance at a fast fight, which thankfully is a 5 in 8 chance at this time. There's also a bit of randomness in Phases 2 and 3 where Macho has a few decisions in his pattern, but generally most of this fight comes down to getting the good pattern at the start and executing when you need to. Stars are given every other punch and a 3 in 8 chance otherwise, so they're generally not too much of an issue. If Salt wants to come back, he needs to do it in this fight. His previous record had a 59 and he could get as low as 51. But the odds are low. Even a moderately lucky fight like a 55 or 56 wouldn't even cut it. He needs to save at least 5 seconds to have a fighting chance against his 210 Tyson. In Phase 1, Salt opens with guard manipulating punches and a delayed gut punch using a buffered dodge to get the right timing for a guaranteed star. After sneaking in some punches which have a 25% chance of being blocked and cancelling Macho's next punch, Salt gets to the crucial moment of the fight. Macho chooses to throw 2 uppercuts, which is the good pattern. However, he's about to do a mini spin, a single spin punch, and Salt wants to knock him down before he gets the chance to do that. So he fires off 2 max damage uppercuts and sneaks in 4 punches to get back to 3 stars and a 30-second knockdown, standard for Phase 1 and a good pattern. In Phase 2, Salt has to temper his uppercuts a bit because Macho can have a pattern where he backs up and dodges the star punch. Then comes a point where he can do a short or a long delay. He chose the short, which is about 2 seconds faster. After that, Macho squares up for the super spin punch, and Salt listens for the tiny blip before the final spin to set up for an uppercut followed by a reverse max damage uppercut for the knockdown. Similarly, in Phase 3, Salt wants to collect some stars, dodge the super spin punch, and hit with 2 stars. Interestingly, the fact that he gets 3 stars is actually a bad thing. The animation after dealing a punch is longer if you get a star than if you don't. Although Salt got the best patterns and delays possible, this wasted extra star ends up costing him a little bit of time, landing him a 53.48. This is still amazing luck, and exactly what he needed to enter the final match with any chance at beating the record. Salt is entering the fight against Mike Tyson with a 12.39. Anything under 12.40 is exceedingly rare. His fastest pace ever at this point is a 12.37.8, and he's only ever had 6 runs before this one entered Tyson under 12.40. This is a chance he only ever gets every few weeks at best, and yet he's still behind the world record. And the world record gets a 2.10 Tyson. To beat it here, Salt needs a 2.08 or better, and based on his own historical data, his odds of nailing a 2.08 fight or lower are in the vicinity of 5 to 10%. Despite being on a 1 in 1,000 runs, he's looking at a less than 10% chance to barely inch out the record. This Mike Tyson fight somehow needs to be both lucky and perfect. Mike Tyson at this point is legendary. Often considered to be one of the hardest video game opponents of all time, he's absolutely no joke, even to top-level speedrunners. If there's one thing to understand in this fight, it's this. Tyson will knock you out in one punch and will block everything you throw at him. To damage him, you need to dodge his punch, then counter and stun him, and hit him with another punch. Each of these 2 punches can either do 1 damage or 5 damage, which means the combo can either do 2, 6, or 10 damage. The first will do 5 damage if it's thrown on the same side that Tyson just punched on, so it's relatively easy to react and respond accordingly. The second, however, is much more tricky. For it to do the maximum damage, it needs to hit Tyson on the very last frame of his stun. This is super risky. If you're early, it's fine because you still get to damage him, only with 1 damage instead. But if you're late, he blocks your punch, you lose stamina, and you do no damage to him. Tyson starts out with 96 HP, which means that assuming you counter on the correct side every time, you would need 16 counters to knock him down if you never hit a frame-perfect punch afterwards, but that number goes down the more frame-perfect counters you get, down to 10 at minimum. Thankfully, it just so happens that you can be early on 1 frame-perfect punch and deal exactly 96 damage in 10 counters, so there is one tiny little bit of leeway to work with. Overall, the fight is extremely straightforward. Summoning Salt needs to land these frame-perfect punches every single time. However, even that's not enough, because on top of the ridiculous execution requirements, for a time as low as 2.08, you also need to get lucky. Tyson starts the round by throwing left and right uppercuts. Most times before a punch, there's a 50-50 chance of a short delay, either 8 or 20 frames depending on the punch, which can throw off your timing, but more importantly, waste precious time. At the speed the clock is running, 20 frames is pretty much exactly 1 in-game second. You of course want as few delays as possible. However, the biggest one comes when he loops back in his decision tree, which is usually after 6 or 8 uppercuts. He can stand there and stare at you for up to 8 in-game seconds. This is called the 8-second delay, and again, it roughly has a 50-50 chance of happening. Salt cannot afford this much time. If that happens, the run is over. With perfect execution, Salt can knock down Tyson for the first time at 53 seconds at the earliest, but most likely in the mid to high 50-second range. Phase 2 is more of the same. Tyson gets up with 56 HP, so you need to hit 6 frame-perfect counters and you can afford to be early on one of them. If you miss none of the first 5, you can even buffer the second punch on the last one to hit Tyson earlier and save a few frames, because you won't care about dealing only 1 damage. Phase 3 is a little bit different because Tyson switches from uppercuts to jabs at 1:30 on the clock, but the core principle remains the same. It's faster not to stun Tyson this time, so you don't get 5 damage for free. You need to hit 8 frame-perfect punches in a row with no possibility of missing without penalty. The first one can be hit consistently with a left-right dodge buffer, but then you're on your own. So this is what Summoning Salt is facing. 21 frame-perfect punches with next to no leeway on missing any of them. And even if he does nail every single one of them, he needs to get almost unreasonably lucky. Let's see how it went. A 56-second phase 1 is great. Salt missed a frame-perfect punch on the 4th counter, so he had to clutch the remaining 6 perfectly, and he did. He got few delays and avoided the 8-second run killer. Here you can see that by nailing the first 5 frame-perfect counters, Salt has the luxury to buffer the last one and send Tyson to the mat a few frames earlier. A 131 phase 2 sets him up nicely for the end of the fight. If all the frame-perfect punches are hit, phase 3 can take 37 to 39 seconds, which yields a final time between 2:08 and 2:10. Remember, Salt needs a 2:08 to beat this record by 2/3 of a second. This is going to be incredibly close.
World record.
Somehow, Salt pulled a magic trick and pulled off a 2:07 Tyson fight, beating the record by 1.6 seconds instead. It turns out that a 36-second phase 3 is technically possible, but very rare. Salt got almost 0 delays. He only got one 8-frame delay just before the final punch. Also, you can see here that he ended phase 2 at 131 by only 1 or 2 frames, and he got the TKO at 2:07, again by a couple of frames at most. And just like that, he overcame enormous odds to come back from behind and beat this world record. This run is 1 in 900. It's unbelievably lucky, but at the same time, you have to take into account that Summoning Salt played 5,185 attempts to get this time. Even when the odds are brutally stacked against you, if you try enough times, it's bound to go your way eventually. So, what would it take to beat this time? Well, the answer is simple: more luck. This run had an incredible beginning until Bald Bull 1, although the difference between a great run and an average run is only a few seconds at this point. Bull 1 could definitely have been better by several seconds. So do Popinski, Bull 2, and especially Dawn 2 all technically have some time to save in them, but Salt was still fortunate enough to get out of these fights with very clearly lucky outcomes. It's possible, but very unlikely, to get even better luck, just like his previous world record did in the red zone. Then, Sandman could be 2 or 3 seconds faster, Macho could have been very slightly faster, and while a 2:07 Tyson fight is nearly impossibly good in a full game run, it could theoretically go even lower, down to a 2:06 or 2:05, but the odds of that happening are astronomically low. Overall, there's about a total of roughly 20 to 25 seconds of time save that would be moderately possible to expect from a full game run, but with each second comes lower and lower odds. Saving as much as 20 seconds would be worse than 1 in a million. So the amount of time saved lies somewhere in that range, depending on how much torture Punch-Out runners are willing to inflict upon themselves. Ultimately, this is what Mike Tyson's Punch-Out speedruns are all about. You have to memorize dozens of strategies and adapt them to every situation. You have to routinely nail button presses within a less than a 1/10 of a second window. You need to listen to near imperceptible audio cues and react instantly. And you need to cap it all off with a gauntlet of 21 straight frame-perfect inputs. In the meantime, the game will be brutally, relentlessly unforgiving 999 times out of 1,000. On the rarest of occasions where the game does throw a bone, it takes a one-of-a-kind speedrunner to take advantage of it. And that speedrunner is Summoning Salt.